AVALON Heights by Kay Leith. Read by Huw Carr. When the taxi reached level ground, Deborah Banks saw the square, white mass of AVALON Heights for the first time. The driver swept the cab round the empty parking area, spraying pink gravel on the surrounding scrubby ground. Builder's litter at the edge of the gravel seemed to have been lying there for a long time. Deborah left the cab eagerly and gazed upwards. The edifice seemed to sway in the immense blue sky, the windows reflecting the swiftly scudding clouds. She walked round to the shady side, as though to make sure that her new home really did have 3 dimensions. The rows of balconies and blank windows were repeated. "Looks lifeless to me," remarked the driver as he unloaded the girl's luggage. Deborah produced the keys and opened her purse to pay the man off, but he shook his head. "I'll carry this lot in for you first." The low-ceilinged hallway was stiflingly warm. She received no reply when she knocked on the door marked "Caretaker." "Lift's not working." The young man's voice echoed sepulchrally as he opened a hatch near the marble floor, pressed something, and little arrows lit up on the indicator plate. Deborah handed him 2 notes. "Thanks, miss. If you need a cab, I'd appreciate the business." "I'll make a note," she promised. The taxi was moving off when the girl, arms waving, flung herself down the front steps. Through the rear mirror, the man saw her and braked. "What's up then? Ghosts?" "My food." "Oh," he handed out the carrier bag. "I didn't notice. Your husband? Is he coming later?" "Yes, tonight." "Oh, well, you'll be all right then." Deborah nodded swiftly and decisively. "Of course. Bye now." But Tom couldn't arrive until the next day. The new car wouldn't be ready until Thursday, and he had to finish things off at the office. She'd lied because she'd noticed the way the man looked at her, and she didn't want to let him know that she was on her own. She was so acutely conscious of her jewelry, smart clothes, and bulging purse. She had never had the chance before to realize the burden that expensive possessions laid on one. She still didn't know whether she was on her head or on her heels. She and Tom were now rich beyond their wildest dreams. When the purchase of the flat, arranged through an agent, was completed, she hadn't been able to wait, even for a few days, to shrug off the old life and don the trappings of wealth. She relocked the big glass front door. Anyone who had the right to enter would have a key. The lift glided to a stop at the 10th floor, and Deborah deposited her things on the bright landing. She watched the lift sink out of sight. Was it automatic, or had someone pressed the button below? A blue door on the left said 10A in gold lettering. On the right was a similar door, but pale grey, marked 10B. She advanced on 10B, composing a genteel phrase or 2 of introduction, and rang the bell. There was no response. Her key fitted trimly into the lock of 10A. Leaving her luggage on the landing, she wandered around the rooms, which were, as yet, only sparsely furnished. Everything in the kitchen worked perfectly and was convenient, clean, and delightfully new. Double doors led to the balcony. The gravel road fell away and joined the main road in the distance, and beyond was the sea. To the right, at the other end of the bay, was the town. Becoming aware of a strange, hissing sound, she went back inside. It seemed louder in the hall, even more so on the landing. Her precious sugar was pouring itself onto the impeccable floor from a tear in the packet. She made an indifferent job of scooping up the grains from the black tiles. Following a light lunch of cheese and biscuits, which reminded her of the lean days, she unpacked her gay new sheets and made up the bed. Slipping off her skirt, she lay down. Ineffable silence, glorious comfort. Her novel soon fell from her hand. Something bit her. Blinking sleep-bemused eyes, she looked around. The sun still shone yellowly. Her watch showed the passage of barely 15 minutes. Groggily raising herself, she gaped at the red stain on the pillow, and on her blouse, too. Rushing to the dressing table, she saw the reason. A cut on the tip of her earlobe. The diamond brooch which she wore on her collar must have cut her as she moved in her sleep. But she could have sworn she'd woken in the same position as when she dropped off. Solitude didn't trouble her, but she hadn't realized until then how isolated she was at Avalon Heights. The telephone had not yet been installed, so there was no way Tom could contact her, or she him. The lift came obediently. The building was just as broodingly quiet as it had been earlier. A breeze had sprung up, bending the grass in the waste ground. Looking out to the sea in the misty distance, she felt as though she were the only living being on a world that had suddenly gone dead. She might have gone for a walk, but for a peculiar reluctance either to leave the building or, once having left it, to return. She knocked again on the caretaker's door and tried the handle. It opened, revealing a comfortably carpeted little airlock of a hall. "Is anyone there?" Pushing open the door opposite, she ventured inside. A newspaper lay on the kitchen table, and there was a faint smell of pipe smoke. A bone on the floor in a corner hinted that the man kept a dog. Perhaps he'd taken it for a walk. The tiny sitting room was empty, and through the slightly open bedroom door, she saw a neatly made single bed. "Have taken possession of 10A today, Mrs. Banks." She put the note on the mat outside his door to hint that that was as far as she'd gone, and got back into the lift. Surprisingly, even the caretaker hadn't a phone. At her flat door, she paused. There was no trace of the sugar she'd spilled, not even in the grooves between the tiles. Ants? Or had the caretaker swept up when she was absent? When the sun went down, Deborah stood on the balcony watching the cars which, in increasing numbers, left the town. They were like errant diamonds escaping from a broken necklace. None of them, however, turned onto the approach road to the flats. Deborah wished that she'd asked the taxi driver to come back. It would have been nice to have had a meal in town, or at least to have driven around for a bit. She went inside and lit the table lamp. Some people were hard to please. She'd been in the place for barely 4 hours, and now she wanted to go out. Perhaps a soak in that elegant new sunken bath with her exotic new bath oil. For no apparent reason, the table lamp went out, plunging the flat in darkness. Panic flared. What if the caretaker had cut off the electricity supply? Why was he hiding himself? Why was everything so quiet? Then she found the wall switch, and terror receded. But behind her, something skittered on the floor. Quickly switching on all the lights, she searched every cupboard and recess. Then she heard the sound again, this time from above. Cautiously, she went out onto the landing. The navy blue dark looked in through the windows, a hostile witness to her fears. The service door beside the lift was locked. Sighing with relief, she conjectured that the noise must have been made by the water tanks, and she hadn't been using water. It was imperative to find out who had. Retrieving her handbag and keys from the lounge, she summoned the lift. All the way down to the ground floor, she jammed open the lift door and rang bells. Becoming increasingly perturbed, she really was alone. There were no other tenants. When she reached the warm gloominess of the entrance hall, she darted to the caretaker's door and rang. Her note was still on the mat. "Oh, no," the plaintive words slipped out and echoed in the stagnant stillness. She stared up at the lift indicator. The basement. Perhaps the infuriating man had been down there all the time. The lift doors spilled a meager pool of light. She reached out, clawing, and the bare bulb lit up an infinity of raw, cold concrete. The pillared vault was obviously the flat's garage. Again, briefly, there was a scuffling sound. Mice or rats? Or the missing caretaker? She crept from pillar to pillar, imagining the myriads of red dots winked at her from pitch-dark corners. There was a car, an ancient but well-cared-for saloon, parked at the side of the ramp which led up to the entrance gate. It was empty and locked. A chill breeze wafted down to her. Perhaps, like Box and Cox, he'd been going in one door and she went out by another. Yes, that had to be it. Making swiftly for the lift, she heard the skittering sound behind her. This time she entered the man's flat without knocking. Fear had made her bold. But he wasn't there anyway. Unable to stomach the idea of returning upstairs, she paced the pink and white tiles. Gradually, her nerves calmed. She could picture the man, careful and middle-aged. Careful because he locked his car in a locked garage, and middle-aged because of the pipe smoke she'd smelled earlier. It all added up to a picture of wholesome ordinariness. She longed to make contact with another human being. If she were the first tenant, he'd probably be glad to see her too. But where was he? She read the 6-day-old newspaper, hardly taking in a word. Her eye fell on the bone in the corner. Fastidious men, and he certainly seemed to be one of those, were unlikely to tolerate messy dogs. Apart from the bone, there was no other indication of a dog's presence, no bowl of water or tins of dog food. Cautiously, she looked into the bedroom. Everything was neat and tidy. Underwear and shirt folded on a chair, shoes marshaled on the floor, uniform on a hanger, and, by the bedside, another bone. A few inches away lay yet another. On Thursday morning, the post office engineers arrived at Avalon Heights to install telephones, and had to go back to town to get a key from the estate agent. The latter declared his amazement that the caretaker, or one of the 2 or 3 tenants who had already moved into their flats, had not allowed the men entry. "There's no sign of life at all," complained the post office man disgustedly. "Just bones." "Bones?" "Yeah, bones. Like somebody's been feeding a dog in the hall." "Dogs are not allowed in Avalon Heights," the agent said coldly. "That's so?" queried the telephone man. "Well, it looks like somebody's been breaking the rules. There's a white football lying there as well." "Football?" the agent blenched. "Yes, come to think of it, it was a funny-looking kind of football." The agent's perturbation was equal to his scorn. "There are no children there either, I assure you." "Then it looks like you've got some checking up to do, mate." The telephone man paused briefly at the door. "Oh, and another thing. Somebody spilled some dark red paint on the floor. It's made a proper mess of your marble hall." Hi, this is Huw Carr. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and listen to this latest story. Don't forget there are dozens of others on the channel, so have a look. You'll probably find something that you may like. If you haven't done so already, press the subscribe button. Add a like to this video and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought. If you've got an original short story that you would like me to read that you think will go well on this channel, join the Facebook group below and get in touch with me, and maybe I'll read it. The best way to keep this channel going and to allow it to grow is for you to share videos on your favorite social media. Tell your friends why you like particular stories. You can, for instance, post it on your Facebook page and say, "Hey friends, come and have a look at this. You might enjoy it." Spreading it around this way is the one way that I know that will really help the channel to grow. For all the support you give, I'd like to say thank you. But I'd also like to remind you, look out for the